They said the Duke of Ashford was a man beyond repair, his heart shattered by tragedy and sealed away behind walls no woman could breach. When Miss Eleanor Ashworth accepted the position as governess to his motherless children, she expected only to teach lessons and maintain order. What she did not expect was to find a man drowning in grief, children starving for affection, and a household trapped in perpetual mourning. On her very first evening, as thunder crashed overhead and rain lashed the windows of Ashford Manor, Eleanor discovered something that would change everything. The Duke's late wife had not died the way everyone believed. If you are listening to this story, do not forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you are listening to this story. I want to know how far it has travelled. The autumn rain fell relentlessly upon the vast estate of Ashford Manor, a sprawling Gothic structure in the heart of Derbyshire that had stood for 3 centuries, its stone walls weathered by time and secrets. Inside the manor's grand drawing room, Alexander Carmichael, the 8th Duke of Ashford, stood before the towering windows, watching the grey skies with eyes that reflected the same desolate colour. He was a man of barely 30 years, yet he carried himself with the weariness of someone who had lived several lifetimes of sorrow. His dark hair, once meticulously maintained, now fell carelessly across his forehead. His jaw, strong and aristocratic, remained perpetually set in a line of rigid control. He wore mourning clothes still, though 2 years had passed since his wife's death, the black fabric of his jacket and waistcoat a stark contrast to his pale skin. The servants whispered that he was the most handsome man in all of England, but beauty meant nothing when paired with such profound unhappiness. "Your Grace, the new governess has arrived," announced Mrs. Pemberton, the elderly housekeeper who had served the Carmichael family for 40 years. Her voice was gentle, cautious, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace that barely held the household together. Alexander did not turn from the window. "Send her to the children directly. I have no interest in meeting her." Mrs. Pemberton's lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval, but she curtsied and withdrew. This was the 5th governess in 18 months. The previous 4 had all left within weeks, unable to manage the Duke's children or tolerate the oppressive atmosphere of mourning that permeated every corner of Ashford Manor. In the entrance hall below, Eleanor Ashworth stood with her worn leather trunk beside her, taking in the grandeur of her new home with a mixture of awe and apprehension. At 23, she was slender and graceful, with auburn hair pulled into a modest bun and intelligent grey eyes that observed everything with quiet intensity. Her dress was plain grey wool, appropriate for a governess, but it fit her well, hinting at a natural elegance that could not be entirely concealed by practical clothing. She had come from London, where she had been governess to a merchant's family, a position she had held for 3 years until the family relocated to India. The salary offered by the Duke of Ashford had been generous, almost suspiciously so, but Eleanor needed the money desperately. Her father, a country vicar, had died the previous year, leaving her mother and younger sister with nothing but debts. Eleanor's earnings were all that stood between her family and destitution. "This way, miss," Mrs. Pemberton said, appearing at the top of the grand staircase. "The children are in the nursery. Lady Amelia is 8, and Lord Thomas is 6. Eleanor followed the housekeeper through corridors lined with family portraits, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow her progress. The manor was beautiful but cold, as though warmth itself had been banished along with laughter and joy. The nursery occupied the entire 3rd floor of the east wing. It was spacious and well-appointed, with a schoolroom, a playroom, and separate bedchambers for the children, yet it felt abandoned somehow, despite the expensive toys and books that filled the shelves. 2 children sat at a small table near the window, so still and quiet that Eleanor initially thought them porcelain dolls. Lady Amelia had her father's dark hair and delicate features that would one day make her a great beauty. Lord Thomas was fair-haired like his late mother, with large blue eyes that seemed too solemn for a child of 6. "Children, "This is Miss Ashworth, your new governess," Mrs. Pemberton announced. Neither child moved or spoke. They simply stared at Eleanor with expressions of polite indifference, as though they had learned long ago not to expect anything from the adults in their lives. Eleanor smiled warmly, refusing to be deterred by their silence. "Good afternoon, Lady Amelia, Lord Thomas. I'm very pleased to meet you both. I thought we might spend today becoming acquainted before we begin our lessons tomorrow. Would you like to show me your favorite books or toys?" "Governesses never stay," Amelia said finally, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. "You will leave too, just like all the others." The words struck Eleanor's heart, but she maintained her composure. "I'm sorry you have been disappointed before. I promise that I intend to stay and to do my very best for both of you." Thomas looked up at her with those impossibly sad eyes. "Will you read to us? Mama used to read to us every night, but she died, and Papa does not come any more." Eleanor knelt beside the boy's chair, bringing herself to his eye level. "I would be honored to read to you. What stories do you like best?" For the first time, a flicker of interest appeared in the child's expression. "Knights and dragons. Excellent choice. Knights and dragons it shall be." As the afternoon progressed, Eleanor began to understand the magnitude of her task. The children were not difficult or misbehaved. They were simply starved of affection and attention, living like small ghosts in their father's house of grief. They spoke rarely, moved quietly, and seemed to have learned to make themselves as invisible as possible. That evening, after the children had been put to bed, Eleanor requested an audience with the Duke. She was informed by the butler, Mr. Holloway, that His Grace did not grant audiences to servants. "I am not asking for a social call," Eleanor said firmly. "I need to discuss the children's education and well-being. Surely the Duke wishes to be informed about his own offspring." Mr. Holloway looked uncomfortable. "His Grace prefers not to be disturbed with such matters. You may submit a written report weekly." Eleanor's frustration mounted. "Mr. Holloway, I must insist. The children are suffering from neglect, not material neglect, but emotional neglect. They need their father." "That is not your concern, Miss Ashworth. You are employed to teach them, not to interfere in family matters." But Eleanor was not a woman who accepted injustice easily, even when it came from a duke. That night, as a storm gathered over Derbyshire, she made her way to the Duke's private study, located in the west wing of the manor. She knocked firmly on the heavy oak door. "Go away," came the cold response from within. Eleanor knocked again. "Your Grace, I am Miss Ashworth, the new governess. I must speak with you about Lady Amelia and Lord Thomas." There was a long silence, then the sound of heavy footsteps. The door opened to reveal the Duke, still dressed in his black mourning clothes, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and irritation written across his aristocratic features. "I made it clear that I do not wish to be disturbed." Eleanor met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. Up close, she could see that his eyes were not grey, but a deep, stormy blue, bloodshot and ringed with dark circles. He smelled of whiskey and looked as though he had not slept properly in months. "Your children are desperately unhappy, Your Grace. They barely speak, they show no interest in play or learning, and they believe themselves to be burdens in their own home. This cannot continue." Alexander's expression darkened. "You have been here less than a day, and you presume to lecture me about my own children." "I presume nothing. I observe, and what I observe breaks my heart." "Then you should steel your heart, Miss Ashworth, as I have steeled mine. The children are fed, clothed, and housed in luxury. What more do they require?" "Love," Eleanor said simply. "They require their father's love." The Duke's hand tightened around his whiskey glass, and for a moment Eleanor thought she had pushed too far. His jaw clenched, his eyes blazed with something between fury and anguish. "You know nothing of what you speak. Nothing. Now leave my study before I dismiss you." Eleanor stood her ground. "Dismiss me if you must, but it will not change the truth. Your children are drowning in grief just as you are, but they do not have the luxury of hiding away from the world. They need you, Your Grace. Whatever pain you carry, it cannot justify abandoning them." The Duke turned away from her abruptly, setting down his glass with such force that Eleanor feared it might shatter. "My wife died giving birth to a stillborn son," he said, his voice raw and broken. "I lost them both in a single night. Do not speak to me of pain or grief when you cannot possibly understand." Eleanor's anger dissolved into compassion. "You are right. I cannot fully understand your loss, but I do know that your living children are losing you day by day, and if something does not change, you will lose them too, not to death but to despair. Is that what your wife would have wanted?" The Duke whirled to face her, his eyes blazing. "Do not dare to speak of what my wife would have wanted. You did not know her. You know nothing of our family. Then help me to know. Help me to help your children." For a long moment they stood in tense silence, the storm outside matching the tempest between them. Then, unexpectedly, the Duke's shoulders sagged, and he looked older, more vulnerable than any duke should ever appear before a servant. "I cannot," he whispered. "I cannot bear to look at them and see her absence. Every time I see Amelia's face, I see Catherine. Every time I hear Thomas laugh, which is rarely now, I remember how she delighted in his laughter. It is unbearable." Eleanor took a cautious step closer. "So you make it bearable by making yourself absent, but in doing so, you rob yourself of the only consolation grief can offer, the love of those who remain." The Duke closed his eyes, his face a mask of torment. "Leave me, Miss Ashworth. Do your duty by my children, but leave me to my grief. It is all I have left." Eleanor wanted to argue further, but she recognized a man at the edge of his endurance. She curtsied formally. "As you wish, Your Grace, but I will not give up on your children, and I hope one day you will not give up on yourself." As she left the study and made her way back through the dark corridors of Ashford Manor, Eleanor felt the weight of the challenge before her. She had been hired to teach the children arithmetic and French, history and literature. Instead, she found herself facing a far more difficult task, bringing life back to a household that had forgotten how to live. Behind her, in his study, Alexander Carmichael poured another glass of whiskey and wondered who this fierce, impertinent governess thought she was. No one had dared to speak to him with such boldness since Catherine's death. Everyone else tiptoed around him, treating him like fragile glass that might shatter at any moment. Miss Ashworth treated him like a man who needed to wake up, and that terrified him more than anything. 3 weeks passed, and Eleanor threw herself into her work with determination and creativity. She transformed the gloomy nursery into a place of warmth and gentle joy, bringing in fresh flowers from the manor's gardens, opening curtains to let in light, and introducing games alongside lessons. Slowly, tentatively, the children began to emerge from their shells. Amelia revealed herself to be remarkably intelligent, devouring books on history and geography with unexpected enthusiasm. Thomas, beneath his timid exterior, possessed a vivid imagination and a talent for drawing. For the first time in 2 years, laughter occasionally echoed through the corridors of the East Wing, but the Duke remained absent, locked away in his study or riding his horse across the estate's grounds at dangerous speeds, as though trying to outrun his demons. Eleanor saw him only from a distance, a dark figure against the autumn landscape, and her heart ached for his isolation, even as she grew frustrated by his stubbornness. The turning point came when the Dowager Duchess of Ashford, Alexander's mother, arrived for an extended visit. Lady Beatrice Carmichael was a formidable woman in her 60s, tall and regal, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. She had been traveling in Italy since her daughter-in-law's death, unable to bear witnessing her son's self-destruction, but duty had finally compelled her return. Eleanor was summoned to the drawing-room on the Dowager's first evening at Ashford Manor. She entered to find the older woman seated in a high-backed chair near the fire, examining her with undisguised curiosity. "So you are the governess who has lasted longer than any of your predecessors," Lady Beatrice said without preamble. "Mrs. Pemberton tells me the children have shown marked improvement under your care," Eleanor curtsied. The children are naturally bright and affectionate, Your Grace. They simply needed someone to recognize it. And my son? Have you had any success in drawing him out of his self-imposed exile? Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words carefully. His Grace remains devoted to his grief. I have attempted to speak with him about the children, but he prefers to avoid such discussions. Lady Beatrice's expression turned grimmer. Alexander was always the most sensitive of my children, despite his efforts to appear strong. When he loved completely. Catherine's death broke something fundamental in him. Forgive me, Your Grace, but it is not too late to mend what is broken. The Duke is still young. His children need him. Life is still possible, even after terrible loss. The Dowager studied Eleanor with new interest. You are bold for a governess. Most would not dare to offer opinions on their employer's personal affairs. Perhaps that is why the previous governesses failed. Children need more than lessons, Your Grace. They need advocates. A small smile touched Lady Beatrice's lips. I believe I shall like you, Miss Ashworth. Now tell me truthfully, how bad is the situation with my grandchildren? Eleanor described the children's emotional state when she had arrived, their silence and resignation, and the progress they had made over the past 3 weeks. The Dowager listened intently, her expression growing more troubled. This cannot continue, Lady Beatrice declared. It is time for this household to rejoin the living. I am hosting a dinner party in 3 days' time. Nothing excessive, just a small gathering of neighboring families, and Alexander will attend whether he wishes to or not. Eleanor felt a flutter of apprehension. Your Grace, perhaps a less public setting might be more suitable for the Duke's first social engagement. He has had 2 years to grieve privately. It is time he remembered his responsibilities. The Dowager's voice softened slightly. I do not do this to be cruel, Miss Ashworth. I do this because my son is drowning, and sometimes a drowning man must be pulled from the water, even if he fights against rescue. The dinner party was arranged with swift efficiency. Invitations were sent to the Thornbury family, the Ashfords' nearest neighbours, the Reverend and Mrs. Wickham from the village, and Lord and Lady Pembroke, old friends of the family. The manor erupted into activity as servants prepared for the first social event since the late Duchess's death. Alexander was furious when he learned of his mother's plans. The entire household heard the argument that took place in the library. I will not be displayed like some curiosity for the amusement of gossips. His voice thundered through the closed doors. You are a duke with responsibilities to your estate, your children and your tenants, Lady Beatrice replied with equal force. You cannot hide away forever, Alexander. It is not what Catherine would have wanted, and it is not what you truly want either. Do not presume to know what I want. Then tell me you wish to spend the rest of your life as a ghost in your own home, while your children grow up without a father, and your estate falls into neglect. Tell me that is what you want, and I will leave you to it. There was a long, painful silence. Finally, Alexander's voice came, defeated and hollow. I will attend your damned dinner party, but do not expect me to play the gracious host. I expect you only to be present, that is all. The rest will come in time. The night of the dinner party arrived cold and clear, with a full moon illuminating the frost-covered grounds. Eleanor had dressed the children in their finest clothes and brought them down to greet their grandmother before bedtime, a small concession Lady Beatrice had insisted upon. Amelia wore a blue velvet dress that brought out the colour of her eyes, and Thomas was handsome in a small jacket and breeches. Under Eleanor's patient care, both children had gained confidence, and they greeted their grandmother's guests with admirable poise. Eleanor stood discreetly near the nursery stairs, ready to escort the children back upstairs once the formalities were complete. From her vantage point, she watched the Duke enter the drawing-room, and her breath caught in her throat. He had abandoned his mourning clothes for the first time, wearing formal evening attire in midnight blue. He was freshly shaven, his dark hair properly styled, and the transformation was striking. This was the Duke of Ashford as society remembered him, powerful, aristocratic, devastatingly handsome. but his eyes remained haunted, and his smile when he greeted the guests did not reach those stormy depths. Lady Charlotte Ashford, a distant cousin of the Duke's late wife, was among the guests. She was a beautiful woman of 27, with golden hair and porcelain skin, dressed in an elegant green silk gown that showcased her considerable charms. She had been a regular visitor to Ashford Manor before Catherine's death, always perfectly solicitous, always impeccably behaved. "Alexander, how wonderful to see you looking so well," Charlotte purred, taking his arm with familiar ease. "We have all been so concerned for you. It does my heart good to see you re-entering society." Eleanor watched this exchange with a strange tightness in her chest that she could not quite identify. The Duke accepted Charlotte's attention with polite detachment, but Lady Beatrice, observing from across the room, frowned with displeasure. The children said their good nights, and Eleanor prepared to lead them upstairs. As they passed near the drawing-room entrance, Thomas suddenly pulled away from her hand and ran to his father. "Papa!" the boy cried, wrapping his small arms around the Duke's leg with desperate affection. The entire room fell silent. Alexander looked down at his son as though seeing a stranger, his expression frozen in shock. For a moment Eleanor thought he might embrace the child, but then his walls slammed back into place, and he gently but firmly detached Thomas's arms. "You should be in bed, Thomas. Go with Miss Ashworth." The rejection was subtle but devastating. Thomas's face crumpled, and he stepped back as though struck. Eleanor hurried forward, gathering the boy into her arms, but not before she saw tears beginning to form in his eyes. "Come along, darlings," she said softly to both children, her own voice thick with emotion. "Let us go upstairs." As she led them away, she heard Charlotte's voice dripping with false sympathy. "Poor little things. They do not understand, do they? How difficult this must be for you, Alexander. Children can be so demanding at such a time." Eleanor's hands clenched into fists, but she maintained her composure until they reached the nursery. There, Thomas finally broke down in sobs, while Amelia stood frozen and pale. "Papa does not love us anymore," Thomas wept. "He does not love us because Mama died, and it is our fault." Eleanor knelt and pulled both children into her embrace. "No, my darlings, no. Your father loves you very much. He is simply so sad about your Mama that he has forgotten how to show it. But it is not your fault, and his sadness is not your fault. Do you understand? None of this is your fault." She held them as they cried, whispering comfort and reassurance, her own heart breaking for these innocent children who had lost so much. Below, the dinner party continued, but Eleanor knew that something irreparable had happened. The Duke's rejection of his son's affection, witnessed by all the guests, would be the talk of the county within days. She settled the children into bed, and then stood at the nursery window, looking out at the moonlit grounds. Her anger at the Duke burned hot and fierce. How could he be so blind? How could he not see what his withdrawal was doing to his own children? Near midnight, after the guests had departed, Eleanor made a decision. She marched down to the Duke's study once more and entered without knocking. Alexander stood before the fire, still in his evening clothes, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into the flames. He did not turn when she entered. "You hurt him," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "Your son reached out to you with love in front of everyone, and you pushed him away as though he were a stranger. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "Get out," the Duke said quietly. "No, not until you hear what I have to say. Thomas cried for an hour tonight. He believes you do not love him anymore. He believes his mother's death is his fault, and your behavior tonight confirmed his worst fears." Alexander whirled around, his eyes blazing. "What would you have me do? Pretend I am whole when I am shattered? Pretend I can be the father they need when I can barely function from one day to the next?" "Yes," Eleanor shouted, abandoning all pretense of deference. "Yes, I would have you pretend if that is what it takes, because those children need you, and they cannot wait until you feel ready to love them again. They are losing you, Your Grace, day by day, and soon it will be too late." "It is already too late," Alexander roared back. "I have nothing left to give them. Can you not understand that? Everything I was died with, Catherine. I am an empty shell, going through the motions of existence. I cannot be what they need." "Then learn," Eleanor insisted, stepping closer. "You are not the only person who has ever lost someone they loved. Grief does not excuse cruelty, and neglect is a form of cruelty, whether you intend it or not. You have no right to speak to me this way. You are a servant in my household. I am a woman with eyes to see and a heart that breaks for those children. My position be damned. Dismiss me if you must, but it will not change the truth." They stood facing each other, both breathing hard, the air between them crackling with emotion. Then, unexpectedly, Alexander's face crumpled, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I do not know how," he whispered brokenly. "I do not know how to go on without her. She was everything to me, everything, and when she died, she took all the light and warmth from the world. I look at my children, and I see her in their faces, and the pain is unbearable. So I stay away, because staying away hurts less than being reminded constantly of what I have lost." Eleanor's anger dissolved into compassion. She knelt beside his chair, her voice softening. "I cannot imagine the depth of your loss, Your Grace, but your children have lost too. They lost their mother, and now they are losing their father, while he still lives. Please, please do not let grief steal what love remains in this house." Alexander raised his head, and Eleanor was shocked to see tears streaming down his aristocratic face. "I am so tired," he admitted, "so tired of the pain, of waking each morning and remembering that she is gone. How do I live with this for the rest of my life?" "One day at a time," Eleanor said gently, "one moment at a time, and you do not have to do it alone. Your children need you, but perhaps you need them just as much." The Duke looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. He saw not just the impertinent governess who challenged him, but a woman of courage and compassion who had forced her way past his defenses, not for her own sake, but for his children's. "Who are you, Miss Ashworth?" he asked wonderingly. "What manner of governess enters a duke's home and turns it upside down in a matter of weeks?" Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I am simply someone who believes that love is stronger than grief, and that children deserve better than to be casualties of their parents' pain." Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well, I will try. I cannot promise success, but I will try to be what they need." It was a small victory, but Eleanor took it gratefully. She rose and curtsied. "That is all anyone can ask, Your Grace." As she left the study, Eleanor felt the weight of what she had done. She had pushed too hard, spoken too boldly, crossed lines that no servant should cross, yet she could not regret it. Those children deserved a father, and that broken man deserved a chance at healing. What she did not know was that, as Charlotte Ashford departed Ashford Manor that night, she had already begun spreading carefully calculated whispers about the Duke's governess, about improper familiarity, and a woman forgetting her place. The seeds of scandal were planted, and they would grow into a thorny thicket that would test Eleanor in ways she could not yet imagine. The Duke kept his word, though his efforts were tentative and often painful to witness. He began taking breakfast in the nursery several times a week, sitting stiffly at the small table while Amelia and Thomas watched him with cautious hope. The conversations were stilted at first, but Eleanor gently guided them, asking the children to share what they were learning or to show their father Thomas's drawings. Slowly, incrementally, something began to shift. Alexander learned that Amelia had a passion for astronomy and spent hours studying the night sky from the nursery window. Thomas, he discovered, had an uncanny memory for stories and could recite entire passages from books after hearing them only once. These small revelations seemed to surprise the Duke, as though he were meeting his children for the first time. Eleanor watched these tentative reunions with quiet satisfaction, but she remained alert for signs of retreat. The Duke was like a wild animal, easily startled back into isolation. She had to balance encouragement with patience, pushing just enough but not so much that he bolted back behind his walls. The household began to take notice of the changes. Servants whispered hopefully about the Duke spending time in the nursery. Mrs. Pemberton smiled more often. Even the Dowager Duchess, during her continued stay at Ashford Manor, expressed cautious optimism. "You have worked a small miracle, Miss Ashworth," Lady Beatrice told her one afternoon as they walked through the manor's extensive gardens. The older woman had taken to inviting Eleanor on these walks, behavior that would have been shocking under normal circumstances, but which the Dowager justified as necessary for discussing the children's progress. "The credit belongs to His Grace, Your Grace. He is the one who chose to try." "Because you gave him no choice," Lady Beatrice said shrewdly. "Mrs. Pemberton told me about your late-night confrontations with my son. Bold behavior for a governess." Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "I overstepped my position. I apologize if—" "Do not apologize for being exactly what this family needed. Alexander has been surrounded by people too afraid to challenge him, too willing to let him destroy himself out of misplaced respect. You showed him the truth, however uncomfortable, and he is better for it." They walked in companionable silence for a moment before the Dowager spoke again. "However, I must warn you that not everyone views your influence so favorably. Lady Charlotte has been spreading rumors about improper behavior between you and the Duke." Eleanor stopped walking, shock and dismay flooding through her. "That is absurd. I have conducted myself with complete propriety. My only concern has been for the children's welfare. I know that, and anyone with sense knows it, but Charlotte is clever and vindictive. She has harbored hopes of becoming the next Duchess of Ashford since before Catherine's death. Your presence and influence threaten those ambitions. I am a governess, Your Grace. I pose no threat to anyone's matrimonial prospects." Lady Beatrice gave her a long, measuring look. "You underestimate yourself, my dear, and you underestimate the change you have wrought in my son. He listens to you. He trusts you. That is a form of intimacy that Charlotte finds intolerable." Eleanor felt deeply unsettled by this conversation. She had been so focused on the children and the Duke's emotional recovery that she had not considered how her actions might be perceived by outsiders, particularly by women with designs on the Duke's title and fortune. "What should I do, Your Grace?" "Continue as you have been. Do your duty by the children and let the gossips talk themselves hoarse. Truth has a way of prevailing over slander given time." But time was not on Eleanor's side. The rumors spread through the county with remarkable speed. Within a fortnight, Eleanor began to notice changes in how she was treated. When she accompanied the children to the village for an outing, women who had previously greeted her with friendly warmth now regarded her with cool speculation. The vicar's wife, Mrs. Wickham, actually crossed the street to avoid speaking with her. The Duke remained oblivious to these social undercurrents, absorbed in his own journey of reconnection with his children. He had begun reading to them at bedtime, a ritual Eleanor had established that he now continued. He also started teaching Thomas to ride, placing the boy on a gentle pony and walking beside him around the paddock. These moments of ordinary fatherhood seemed to bring Alexander back to life in small but significant ways. Eleanor should have been solely happy about this progress, but the whispers and stares had begun to wear on her. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was being judged and condemned based on malicious speculation. The injustice of it rankled deeply. The situation came to a head when Lady Charlotte paid a call to Ashford Manor, ostensibly to visit Lady Beatrice, but actually to assess the situation firsthand. Eleanor was supervising the children's afternoon lessons when a summons came that the Dowager wished to see her in the drawing room. She entered to find Lady Charlotte seated elegantly on a sofa, taking tea with Lady Beatrice. The Dowager's expression was strained, while Charlotte wore a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Ah, Miss Ashworth," Charlotte said sweetly, "how fortuitous. I was just telling Lady Beatrice how remarkably well the children seem to be doing under your care. You have quite transformed this household." Eleanor curtsied warily. "Thank you, Lady Charlotte. The children are naturally gifted students. And the Duke, I understand he has emerged from his seclusion rather dramatically. One might almost think he has found a reason to rejoin the living world." Charlotte's tone was light, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. His Grace loves his children. That love has proven stronger than grief, as it should be. How fortunate that he had you to remind him of his duty. Such dedication in a governess is rare. One might almost think you have a personal interest in the Duke's welfare that extends beyond professional obligations. The accusation, though veiled, was unmistakable. Eleanor felt her temper rise, but she maintained her composure. My interest is in the welfare of my students, Lady Charlotte. Nothing more, nothing less. Of course, Charlotte replied, her smile sharpening. Though I confess, the entire county is abuzz with speculation about the governess who has captured the Duke's attention so completely. Late-night visits to his study, private consultations, the intimacy of the nursery shared. One must be careful about appearances, Miss Ashworth. A woman's reputation once tarnished is nearly impossible to restore. Lady Beatrice set down her teacup with enough force to rattle the saucer. Charlotte, that is quite enough. Miss Ashworth's conduct has been beyond reproach. If you have nothing better to do than spread malicious gossip, perhaps you should direct your energies elsewhere. Charlotte's mask slipped for a moment, revealing naked hostility. I simply wish to protect Alexander from further pain. He has suffered so much already. It would be tragic if he were to be taken advantage of in his vulnerable state by someone with ambitions above her station. Eleanor had endured enough. I have no ambitions beyond fulfilling my duties as governess, Lady Charlotte. If my dedication to the children's welfare offends you, that says more about your character than mine. Now, if you will excuse me, I must return to my students. She curtsied and left the room, her heart pounding with anger and humiliation. Behind her she heard Lady Beatrice's voice, cold with aristocratic disdain. You have overstepped, Charlotte. Miss Ashworth is under my protection and the Duke's employ. I will not tolerate any further attempts to smear her reputation. Is that understood? Charlotte's response was inaudible, but Eleanor did not need to hear it. The damage was done. The rumors would continue, perhaps even intensify, now that Charlotte's confrontation had failed. Eleanor's position at Ashford Manor had become precarious, not because of any fault of her own, but because she had dared to be effective, to make herself indispensable to a family that Charlotte coveted as her own. That evening, Eleanor stood once again at the nursery window, watching darkness fall over the estate. She thought of her mother and sister, dependent on her income. She thought of the children who had finally begun to heal, and she thought of the Duke, whose blue eyes had started to hold glimmers of life again instead of just emptiness. She could not leave, no matter what slander Charlotte spread. These children needed her, and perhaps, though she barely dared admit it even to herself, she had come to care for their father as well. Not inappropriately, she told herself firmly, simply as one human being concerned for another's well-being. But her heart, treacherous organ that it was, whispered that she was lying to herself. A knock at the nursery door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find the Duke standing in the corridor, looking uncertain and almost boyish, despite his imposing height and aristocratic bearing. "Miss Ashworth, might I have a word?" "Of course, Your Grace." She stepped into the corridor, closing the door quietly so as not to wake the sleeping children. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. A gesture she had learned indicated discomfort. "My mother informed me of Lady Charlotte's behavior this afternoon. I must apologize. I had no idea that the time we spend discussing the children had created such speculation." "You need not apologize for the small-mindedness of others, Your Grace, but I do need to protect your reputation. You have done everything for my family and received nothing but slander in return. It is intolerable." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Welcome to the lot of women, Your Grace. We are damned if we excel at our work, and damned if we fail at it. I have learned to care less about society's opinion than about my own conscience. My conscience is clear." Alexander looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are an extraordinary woman, Miss Ashworth. I am beginning to understand why my children adore you and why my mother has taken you under her wing. You have a rare courage. I simply do what I believe to be right. That is the very definition of courage." He paused, seeming to struggle with some internal debate. "Would you walk with me? The evening is fine, and I find I'm too restless to sit indoors." Eleanor knew she should refuse. Every moment alone with the Duke provided more ammunition for the gossips, but something in his eyes, a vulnerability and need for companionship, made refusal impossible. "Very well, Your Grace, let me fetch my shawl." They walked through the gardens as twilight deepened into night, the first stars appearing overhead. Alexander spoke of Catherine for the first time, without breaking down, sharing memories of their courtship and marriage. Eleanor listened, offering no platitudes, simply giving him the gift of her attention and understanding. "She would have liked you," Alexander said suddenly. "Catherine, I mean, she valued intelligence and courage in people, and you possess both in abundance. I wish I could have known her. So do I. She would have ensured my children never suffered the neglect I subjected them to. She was a better person than I am, in every way." "That is grief speaking, Your Grace, not truth. You are a good man who experienced terrible trauma. The fact that you lost your way for a time does not make you a bad person, it makes you human." Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his features were softer, less haunted. "How did you become so wise, Miss Ashworth? You are what, 23? Yet you speak with the understanding of someone much older." "Hardship ages one quickly, Your Grace. I lost my father last year, and I have been the sole support of my mother and sister since then. Responsibility has a way of instilling wisdom, or at least the appearance of it. I did not know. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. It is part of why I understand, at least in small measure, what you have endured. Loss changes us fundamentally. We can choose to let it destroy us, or we can choose to let it teach us. You are finally choosing the latter, and I am proud of you for it." No governess should speak to a duke with such familiarity, but the words came from Eleanor's heart before her head could censor them. To her surprise, Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "You are proud of me?" The impertinence of it. But his tone was warm, almost teasing. Eleanor felt her cheeks heat. "Forgive me, Your Grace, I spoke out of turn." "No, don't apologize. It is refreshing to be treated as a man rather than a title or a tragedy. You have given me that gift, Miss Ashworth, and I am grateful for it." They stood in the moonlit garden, something unspoken passing between them, a connection that transcended the vast social gulf that separated a duke from a governess. For just a moment, they were simply two people who had found unexpected understanding in each other. Then Alexander stepped back, the spell broken. "We should return to the house. It grows late, and you have lessons to prepare for tomorrow." As they walked back, neither noticed the figure watching from an upper window, silhouetted against the light. Lady Charlotte had extended her visit and now had the evidence she needed to transform her rumors into something that looked like truth. The governess and the Duke, walking alone together in the moonlight in what appeared to be intimate conversation. By morning, it would be the scandal of the county, and Eleanor's world was about to come crashing down around her. The scandal erupted with devastating speed. By the following afternoon, 3 separate families had sent notes to Lady Beatrice expressing their concern about the situation at Ashford Manor. By evening, the rector himself paid a call, suggesting delicately that perhaps Miss Ashworth's services were no longer appropriate given the gossip. Eleanor learned of this from Mrs. Pemberton, who came to the nursery with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry, Miss Ashworth. None of us believe a word of it, but His Grace is meeting with his mother now to discuss your position." Eleanor felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had known the scandal was coming, but the reality of dismissal was still shocking. "I see. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Pemberton." "It is not right," the housekeeper insisted. "You have done nothing but good for this family. Those children love you. His Grace has come back to life because of you, and this is how you are repaid." "Such is the way of the world," Eleanor said quietly, fighting to maintain her composure. "Would you mind staying with the children while I speak with the Duke?" She did not wait for permission or summons. She went directly to the Duke's study, where she could hear raised voices from within. She knocked firmly and entered without waiting for acknowledgement. Alexander and Lady Beatrice both turned to stare at her. The Duke looked haggard, as though he had aged 10 years overnight. The Dowager appeared grimly determined. "Miss Ashworth, this is not an appropriate time," Lady Beatrice began, but Eleanor held up her hand. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but I believe I have a right to be present during a discussion about my future." She turned to the Duke. "I understand that my position here has become untenable. I will, of course, resign immediately to spare you further embarrassment." "Like hell you will," Alexander said forcefully, startling them both. "You have done nothing wrong. I will not sacrifice you to appease the gossips. Your Grace, with respect, you have no choice. My continued presence here damages your reputation and, more importantly, could harm your children's prospects. Society's judgment is unjust, but it is also inescapable." "Then society can go hang," the Duke declared. "I have spent 2 years living according to what others expected of me, drowning in grief because I thought that was what a proper Duke should do. You taught me that sometimes one must defy expectations to do what is right. I will not throw you to the wolves now." Eleanor's heart swelled with emotion, but she forced herself to be practical. "Your Grace, you are not thinking clearly. Lady Amelia will need to make her debut in society in 10 years. If I remain, the taint of scandal will follow her. Is that what you want?" The Duke's face darkened with frustration. "What I want is for people to see the truth, that you are a woman of impeccable character who has saved my family from ruin. Why should your reputation be destroyed because we walked in the garden and spoke of nothing more scandalous than grief and parenthood?" "Because I am a woman and a servant, and you are a duke," Eleanor said simply. "The world is not fair, Your Grace. We must work within its constraints or be destroyed by them." Lady Beatrice had been watching this exchange with sharp interest. Now she spoke, her voice thoughtful. "There may be another solution. Miss Ashworth, what if you were not a governess?" Both Eleanor and Alexander turned to stare at her. "I am not sure I understand, Your Grace," Eleanor said carefully. "You are clearly a gentlewoman by birth and education, despite your current circumstances. Your father was a vicar, I believe. That makes you respectable gentry, though impoverished. What if we were to reposition you not as a servant, but as a companion to me, the Dowager Duchess? A lady of gentle birth assisting an elderly duchess is far less scandalous than a governess in close contact with the Duke." "Mother, you are not elderly, and you have no need of a companion," Alexander protested. "I am 64 years old, and I shall decide what I need. Miss Ashworth, you would still teach the children, but your official position would be as my companion. You would take meals with the family rather than in the nursery. You would be introduced in society as my protégée, a respectable young lady under my protection. It is not a perfect solution, but it would go far toward quieting the scandal." Eleanor's mind raced. What Lady Beatrice proposed was highly unconventional, but not unheard of. Impoverished gentlewomen often became companions to wealthy widows, and such positions carried far more respectability than that of governess. "The salary would need to be appropriate to your new status," Lady Beatrice continued. "Shall we say twice what you currently earn, plus a clothing allowance, as you will need to dress more fittingly for your elevated position?" "Your Grace, this is too generous." "Nonsense, it is barely adequate compensation for what you have done for this family." "Well, do you accept?" Eleanor looked at the Duke, trying to read his expression. He was watching her intently, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. It was not just gratitude or respect, it was something deeper, more complex. "I accept with thanks, Your Grace. I will do my best to justify your faith in me." Lady Beatrice smiled with satisfaction. Excellent. We will make the announcement tomorrow. Alexander, you will host a proper ball in 3 weeks' time to mark the occasion and to demonstrate that this household has nothing to hide. We will invite everyone of consequence in the county, and we will hold our heads high. A ball? Alexander looked horrified. Mother, I have not hosted a ball since before Catherine died. Then it is past time you did. We will show society that Ashford Manor is no longer a house of mourning, but a home of life and joy. Miss Ashworth's transformation from governess to companion will be celebrated as the happy event it is. Anyone who dares to whisper scandal will be shown just how wrong they are. It was a bold strategy, one that could either restore Eleanor's reputation or destroy it completely. But looking at Lady Beatrice's determined face, and Alexander's reluctant acceptance, Eleanor realized the Dowager Duchess was a formidable woman who usually got her way. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Eleanor was fitted for new dresses appropriate to her elevated status, nothing extravagant, but well-made and fashionable. She began taking meals with the family in the formal dining room, a change that felt strange at first, but which the Duke seemed to welcome. Alexander was different with her now, more open, more willing to share his thoughts and feelings. They fell into a pattern of evening walks after the children were abed, during which they discussed everything from estate management to philosophy to their personal histories. Eleanor learned that the Duke had travelled extensively before his marriage, that he played the piano beautifully but had not touched the instrument since Catherine's death, and that he possessed a dry wit that emerged once he allowed himself to relax. "You are monopolizing Miss Ashworth's time, Alexander," Lady Beatrice observed one evening at dinner, her tone carefully neutral but her eyes twinkling. Alexander had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Miss Ashworth's insights are valuable. I find her perspective on estate matters particularly helpful. Her perspective on many matters seems to have become indispensable to you. Mother, if you have something to say, please say it directly." Lady Beatrice smiled enigmatically. "Simply that I am pleased to see you taking an interest in life again, my dear. Whatever the catalyst, the change is most welcome." Eleanor felt her cheeks heat and focused intently on her dinner plate. She told herself firmly that the Duke's attention was simply that of a man grateful for help with his children. Nothing more. The fact that her heart raced when he smiled at her, or that she found herself thinking about him at odd moments, was merely a natural response to his kindness and growing friendship. She was lying to herself, and somewhere deep inside, she knew it. The night of the ball arrived, crisp and cold, with a dusting of snow lending the estate a fairy-tale quality. Ashford Manor blazed with light from every window, and carriages began arriving at sunset, disgorging elegantly dressed guests who came with curiosity and speculation. Eleanor wore a gown of deep blue silk, simply styled but becoming, with her auburn hair dressed in an elegant arrangement. Lady Beatrice had insisted on lending her a sapphire necklace that had belonged to Alexander's grandmother, and the jewels glittered at Eleanor's throat. "You look beautiful, Miss Ashworth," Amelia said, as Eleanor came to the nursery to say good-night to the children before joining the ball. "Like a princess." "Hardly that, darling, but thank you. You two be good for Mrs. Pemberton, and I will tell you all about the ball tomorrow." As she descended the grand staircase to join the receiving line, Eleanor caught sight of herself in a gilt mirror and barely recognized the woman reflected there. She looked confident, elegant, every inch a lady. But inside, her stomach churned with nervous anxiety. The Duke waited at the bottom of the stairs, magnificent in formal black and white evening clothes. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes, an emotion she dared not name. "Miss Ashworth," he said softly, offering his arm, you look lovely. Thank you, Your Grace. You are very kind. I am truthful." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "I fear every man in the county will be queuing up to dance with you tonight. Then it is fortunate that I know only one dance passably well, and will spend most of the evening hiding in corners." "You will do no such thing." You will hold your head high and show them all that you have nothing to be ashamed of." The ball was a triumph, though Eleanor would not have predicted it at the start. Lady Charlotte arrived early, resplendent in a gown of gold silk that showcased her considerable beauty. She swept through the ballroom with the confidence of a woman who expected to be crowned queen, and her eyes, when they fell on Eleanor, glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Miss Ashworth, how delightful to see you elevated to such a lofty position," Charlotte purred during a brief encounter near the refreshment table. "One might almost think you had schemed your way into the family's good graces. One might think many foolish things if one's mind naturally tends towards suspicion and malice," Eleanor replied evenly. Charlotte's smile sharpened. "Careful, Miss Ashworth. You may have charmed the dowager and manipulated the duke, but society is not so easily fooled. We see you for what you are, an ambitious nobody grasping above her station. And I see you for what you are, Lady Charlotte, a woman so consumed by jealousy and entitlement that she cannot bear to see others happy. I pity you truly." Before Charlotte could respond, the Duke appeared at Eleanor's side. "Lady Charlotte, I hope you are enjoying the evening. Miss Ashworth, I believe this is our dance." He led Eleanor onto the floor for a waltz, and as his hand settled at her waist and her hand found his shoulder, the ballroom seemed to fade away. They moved together with surprising grace, and Eleanor found herself lost in the intensity of his blue eyes. "You handled Charlotte admirably," Alexander murmured. "She is deeply unhappy. Unhappy people often lash out at those who remind them of their own discontent. You are very generous in your assessment. Most would simply call her what she is, a vicious harpy." Eleanor laughed despite herself. "Your Grace, that is most uncharitable, but accurate." He smiled, and Eleanor felt her heart stumble. "I want you to know that whatever society thinks, whatever gossip they spread, you have earned your place in this household through merit and character alone. You saved us, Miss Ashworth. My children were dying inside, and I was already dead. You brought us back to life. You give me too much credit, Your Grace. You chose to change. I simply provided the push. A push that required remarkable courage. Most people in your position would have kept silent, done the minimum required, collected their salary, and avoided trouble. You refused to let me destroy myself and my family out of misplaced deference. That takes extraordinary strength of character." They danced in silence for a moment, moving in perfect synchronization, as though they had waltzed together 1,000 times before. Then Alexander spoke again, his voice rough with emotion. "I am going to say something highly inappropriate, Miss Ashworth, and I apologize in advance, but I find that I cannot continue without speaking the truth." Eleanor's heart began to pound. "Your Grace, perhaps. I have come to care for you," he said quietly, urgently. "Not as an employee or even as a friend, though you are certainly both those things. I care for you as a man cares for a woman he admires and respects and finds himself unable to stop thinking about. I know this is impossible. I know the gulf between us is vast, but I needed you to know." Eleanor felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. This could not be happening. Dukes did not fall in love with governesses turned companions. This was the stuff of novels, not real life. "You are grieving, Your Grace," he managed to say. "You are confused because I helped your children because I—" "Do not tell me what I am feeling," Alexander interrupted, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "I know my own heart, Eleanor. May I call you Eleanor, just for this moment?" Hearing her given name in his voice sent shivers through her entire body. "Your Grace!" "Alexander. My name is Alexander." "This is madness," Eleanor whispered. "You are a duke. I'm a vicar's daughter with no fortune, no connections, no— You are the woman who taught me that life is worth living again. You are intelligent, courageous, compassionate and beautiful, both inside and out. Your birth and fortune mean nothing to me. They mean everything to society. Your children, my children, adore you. They would be overjoyed." Eleanor's mind reeled. Part of her wanted to believe this was possible, that happiness could be found in such an unlikely place. But the practical part of her, the part that had learned harsh lessons about the world, knew better. "Ask me to stay as your companion," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the music. "Ask me to continue caring for your children and serving your mother. But do not ask for more than that, Alexander, please, because I cannot give it, no matter how much I might wish to." The Duke's face reflected profound pain, but also understanding. "Because of society's judgment? Because I have a family who depends on me, and I cannot risk everything on a fantasy. Because your children need stability, not more scandal. Because—" She paused, then forced herself to continue. "Because you deserve to marry someone who can be a true duchess, who can manage your household and navigate society's intricacies and give you heirs without whispers following her everywhere. Someone like Lady Charlotte, but kinder." "I would rather die alone than marry someone like Charlotte," Alexander said fiercely. "But I understand your reasoning, even if I disagree with it. You are protecting everyone except yourself. It is very much in character." The waltz ended, and they separated to applause from the watching crowd. As other dancers took the floor, Eleanor excused herself and fled to the conservatory, desperate for air and space to regain her composure. She stood among the tropical plants, breathing in their humid scent, trying to slow her racing heart. The Duke loved her, or believed he did. It seemed impossible, miraculous, terrifying, and she had sent him away because it was the right thing to do. A sound behind her made her turn. Lady Charlotte stood in the conservatory doorway, her expression triumphant. "I saw you dancing with Alexander. I saw how he looked at you. You have ensnared him completely, haven't you? The ambitious little nobody has captured the Duke." "You understand nothing," Eleanor said wearily. "Leave me alone, Charlotte. It will not last. He is infatuated because you resemble his late wife, or because you manipulated his vulnerable children, or because he is simply desperate for female companionship after 2 years of mourning. But eventually, he will see you for the fortune-hunting schemer you are." Eleanor had endured enough. She turned to face Charlotte fully, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "I have just turned down everything I could possibly want because I refuse to damage the man and children I care about. So you can take your poisonous accusations and choke on them. I am done tolerating your cruelty." Charlotte's face twisted with fury. "You will regret this. I will make certain of it. By the time I am finished, your reputation will be so thoroughly destroyed that you will be unemployable as a scullery maid, let alone a companion." "Do your worst," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the fear that clutched at her heart. "I will not sacrifice my integrity to appease you or anyone else." She walked past Charlotte and back into the ballroom, her head high, her heart breaking. She had done the right thing by refusing the Duke's implicit proposal. She knew it was the right thing, so why did it feel like she had just thrown away her only chance at happiness? The morning after the ball, Eleanor woke with swollen eyes from crying half the night. She dressed mechanically and went to the nursery, where the children greeted her with excited questions about the ball. She answered as best she could, painting a picture of elegant gowns and wonderful music, while carefully omitting her own emotional turmoil. The Duke did not appear for breakfast in the nursery. Mrs. Pemberton reported that he had left early for a ride and had not yet returned. Eleanor told herself this was for the best. Distance was necessary now for both their sakes. Lady Beatrice, however, had other plans. She summoned Eleanor to her private sitting room that afternoon, where the Dowager sat with tea and a knowing expression. "Sit down, my dear. We need to talk." Eleanor sat, her stomach knotting with apprehension. "Your Grace, my son came to my chambers last night after the ball. He was quite distraught. He told me about your conversation during the waltz." Eleanor felt heat flood her face. "Your Grace, I assure you, nothing inappropriate—" "Oh, do stop with the propriety nonsense," Lady Beatrice interrupted, with uncharacteristic bluntness. "You love him. He loves you. The children love you. This is not complicated except that you are both being absurdly noble about class differences that frankly are becoming increasingly irrelevant in modern times. Your Grace, I am a vicar's daughter with no fortune. The Duke deserves to be happy, which he has not been for 2 years until you arrived. Do you know what he said to me last night? He said that he thought he could never love again, that his heart had been buried with Catherine, but that you had somehow awakened something he thought was dead forever. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. That only makes it more painful, Your Grace, because I cannot marry him, no matter what either of us feels. The scandal would destroy his children's futures. Would it? Lady Beatrice asked thoughtfully. Or is that simply what you have been conditioned to believe? Consider, you are a gentlewoman by birth. Your father was a respected clergyman. You are intelligent, educated, and have demonstrated remarkable character. Yes, you lack fortune, but Alexander has more than enough for both of you. As for society's opinion, well, the Carmichael family has been powerful for 3 centuries. We do not require society's permission for anything. But Lady Amelia's debut will be sponsored by a Dowager Duchess and presented by a Duchess in residence. Any whispers about her stepmother's origins will be drowned out by the weight of our family's influence. You underestimate how much social power we actually wield. Eleanor wanted desperately to believe this, but years of pragmatism held her back. And if you are wrong, if I marry the Duke and it does damage his family's standing, I could never forgive myself. Lady Beatrice studied her for a long moment. You truly love him, don't you? This is not about his title or wealth. I love him, Eleanor admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. I love his strength and his vulnerability. I love how he plays on the floor with Thomas, building castles from blocks. I love the way he listens to Amelia's theories about the stars as though she were a Cambridge professor. I love that he is trying so hard to heal, even when it costs him everything. But loving him does not mean I should marry him. Why not? Give me one reason that is not based on fear. Eleanor opened her mouth to reply, then closed it again. Every reason that came to mind was rooted in fear. Fear of scandal, fear of inadequacy, fear of failing the children, fear of not being enough. Exactly, Lady Beatrice said softly. You cannot, because there is no good reason beyond fear. And my dear, if you let fear dictate your choices, you will live a half-life forever, always wondering what might have been. Before Eleanor could respond, a commotion erupted in the entrance hall below. Raised voices, urgent and distressed, echoed through the manor. Lady Beatrice and Eleanor rushed to the stairs to find servants clustered around the Duke, who had just returned from his ride. Alexander's face was grey with pain, and he cradled his left arm against his chest. His jacket was torn and muddy, and blood seeped through a gash on his forehead. "Your Grace!" Eleanor cried, rushing down the stairs without thought for propriety. "What happened?" "My horse stumbled near the ravine," Alexander said through gritted teeth. "I fell. It is nothing serious. You are bleeding and clearly in pain. That is far from nothing. Someone fetch Dr. Morrison immediately." Lady Beatrice took command of the situation, ordering servants to prepare the Duke's chamber and fetch medical supplies. Eleanor found herself swept along in the organized chaos, helping to support Alexander as they guided him upstairs. In his chamber, she helped him remove his torn jacket, revealing a badly dislocated shoulder. Alexander's face was white with pain, but he managed a weak smile when he saw Eleanor's distressed expression. "I am harder to kill than this, Eleanor. Do not look so frightened. You could have broken your neck. You could have died. But I did not. Though I confess, seeing such concern in your eyes makes the pain almost worthwhile." Dr. Morrison arrived and confirmed the diagnosis. Dislocated shoulder, various bruises, and a minor concussion. He reset the shoulder with swift efficiency while Alexander bit down on a leather strap to keep from crying out. Eleanor held his free hand throughout, squeezing tightly, offering what comfort she could. When it was done, and Alexander lay propped against pillows with his arm in a sling, pale but no longer grey, the doctor gave strict instructions for rest and observation over the next several days. "Someone should sit with His Grace tonight," Dr. Morrison said. "The concussion is minor, but it is best to wake him every few hours to ensure there are no complications." "I will do it," Eleanor said immediately. Lady Beatrice raised an eyebrow but did not object. The doctor departed, and servants brought a comfortable chair, placing it near the Duke's bed. As evening fell, Lady Beatrice checked on them one final time. "The children are asking after their father. I have assured them he is fine. Perhaps you could bring them in briefly tomorrow morning, Miss Ashworth." "Of course, Your Grace." "And Eleanor, he could have died today. Life is uncertain and short. Perhaps it is time to stop letting fear make your decisions." After the Dowager left, Eleanor settled into her chair, a book in her lap that she had no intention of reading. Alexander dozed fitfully, occasionally murmuring in his sleep. Each time he stirred, Eleanor rose to check on him, laying a cool cloth on his forehead or adjusting his pillows. Near midnight, Alexander woke fully and found her watching over him. "You should be sleeping. This is not your duty. Duty has nothing to do with it. I am here because I choose to be, because you care for me." Eleanor hesitated, then decided that honesty was owed after all that had passed between them. "Yes, because I care for you very much." Alexander reached for her hand with his uninjured arm. "Then why do you deny us both a chance at happiness? Is my love truly so inadequate that you cannot overcome your fears?" "Your love is not inadequate. It is extraordinary and terrifying because it is everything I thought I could never have. I am afraid, Alexander. I am afraid of hurting you, of failing your children, of not being enough. You are already more than enough. You are everything. Eleanor, when I fell today, the only thing I could think was that I might die without you knowing how much you mean to me. Life is precious and uncertain. My first marriage taught me that. We do not get unlimited time to seize happiness. We must take it when it appears, or risk losing it forever." Eleanor felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "If I say yes, if I agree to marry you, you must promise me something. Promise that if the scandal becomes too much, if it damages your children or your family, you will not regret your choice. Promise that you will not one day resent me for the consequences." "I promise," Alexander said solemnly, "but I will go further. I promise to spend every day for the rest of my life ensuring you never regret choosing me. I promise to honor your courage and your compassion. I promise to be worthy of the extraordinary gift you are giving me. You already are worthy. You have always been worthy. Then say yes. Marry me, Eleanor. Make me whole again. Make our family complete." Eleanor looked at this man, this duke who had been brought so low by grief and who had fought his way back to life with her help. She thought of his children, who already loved her like a mother. She thought of Lady Beatrice, who had become the mentor and friend she had never known she needed, and she thought of her own heart, which had already made the decision her head was still debating. "Yes," she whispered, "yes, I will marry you." Alexander's face transformed with joy despite his pain. He pulled her down gently and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and finally her lips in a kiss that was tender and sweet and full of promise. "I love you, Eleanor Ashworth. I love your courage and your kindness, and the way you refuse to let me hide from life. I love that you challenge me and comfort me and see me as a man rather than a title. I will spend the rest of my days proving myself worthy of that love. And I love you, Alexander Carmichael. I love your strength and your vulnerability and the beautiful father you are learning to become. I love the way you play piano when you think no one is listening, and the way you laugh at Thomas's silly jokes, and the way you look at me as though I am precious. You have already proven yourself worthy 1,000 times over." They stayed like that for a long time, Eleanor kneeling beside the bed, Alexander holding her hand as though it were his anchor to life itself. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the estate in pristine white. The next morning, the children were told that their father had taken a fall but was recovering well. When they saw Eleanor sitting at his bedside, still in yesterday's gown, her hair slightly dishevelled, they exchanged significant glances. "Miss Ashworth, did you stay with Papa all night?" Amelia asked, with the particular insight of an 8-year-old girl. "I did. Doctor, Morrison wanted someone to watch over him." "Because you love him," Thomas said matter-of-factly. Both adults stared at the boy in surprise. Eleanor recovered first. "What makes you say that, darling?" "Because you look at Papa the way he looks at you, like you are both happy but trying to hide it. Children see far more than we give them credit for," Alexander said with a smile. "Come here, both of you." The children climbed carefully onto the bed, avoiding their father's injured side. Alexander wrapped his good arm around them. "Miss Ashworth and I have something to tell you. How would you feel if I asked her to marry me and become your new mama?" Amelia's face lit up with joy. "Truly? Oh, Papa, truly, truly. But only if you both approve. You are the most important people in my life, and I want you to be happy." Thomas launched himself at Eleanor, wrapping his small arms around her neck. "Please say yes, Miss Ashworth. Please be our mama. We love you so much." Eleanor hugged the boy tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I already said yes, darling. I would be honored to be your mama." What followed was chaos of the happiest kind, with children laughing and talking over each other, planning the wedding and asking 100 questions. Lady Beatrice arrived to investigate the commotion, and upon learning the news, simply smiled knowingly. "About time you both came to your senses. Eleanor, we must begin planning immediately. A duke's wedding requires at least 3 months of preparation." 3 months, Eleanor said faintly. "I would marry her tomorrow if society permitted it," Alexander declared, "but I suppose some concessions to propriety must be made." The announcement of the engagement created a sensation throughout the county, as Lady Beatrice had predicted. Some families expressed shock and disapproval at a duke marrying so far beneath his station, but an equal number, perhaps influenced by the Dowager Duchess's formidable social influence, congratulated the couple warmly. Lady Charlotte, predictably, was apoplectic. She made one final call to Ashford Manor, ostensibly to offer her congratulations, but actually to deliver a cutting set down. "You must be very pleased with yourself, Miss Ashworth," Charlotte said with venomous sweetness. "You have achieved what most would consider impossible, ensnaring a duke through manipulation and scheming." Eleanor, secure now in Alexander's love and Lady Beatrice's support, regarded Charlotte with something approaching pity. "I am pleased, Charlotte, but not for the reasons you imagine. I am pleased because I have found love with a good man, because I will have the privilege of raising 2 wonderful children, and because I have been given a family when I thought I had lost everything. That you cannot understand such joy speaks to your own unhappiness, not to any scheme of mine." "You will fail," Charlotte hissed. "You will embarrass him in society, you will make mistakes, and eventually he will see that he made a terrible error." "Perhaps," Eleanor conceded, "but he will have made that error with full knowledge and by his own choice, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of his faith in me. Can you say the same about any relationship you have pursued, or is your whole life built on calculation and ambition rather than genuine feeling?" Charlotte had no answer to that. She left Ashford Manor in high dudgeon and was not seen again in the neighbourhood for many months. As the wedding preparations progressed, Eleanor found herself welcomed into the Duke's family with warmth that surprised her. She made trips to London with Lady Beatrice to order her trousseau, met Alexander's sisters, who travelled from Scotland for the engagement celebration, and began learning the intricacies of managing a ducal household. But the most precious moments were the quiet ones, reading bedtime stories to the children, walking in the gardens with Alexander as his shoulder healed, planning their future together. They decided that Catherine's portrait would remain hanging in the gallery, but that the house would be redecorated to reflect new life rather than eternal mourning. "She would approve, I think," Alexander said one evening as they sat in the drawing room, Eleanor's head resting on his uninjured shoulder. Catherine was never morbid. She loved life and would want us to live fully. "I will never try to replace her in the children's hearts," Eleanor promised. "She will always be their first mother. And you will be the mother they remember, the one who raised them and loved them. There is room for both memories in their hearts, just as there is room in mine for both grief for what was lost and joy for what I have found." The wedding took place in early spring, in the village church where generations of Carmichaels had been baptized, married, and eulogized. Eleanor wore a gown of cream silk, elegant but not ostentatious, and carried a bouquet of spring flowers from the estate gardens. Amelia served as her flower girl, and Thomas, with great solemnity, carried the rings. As Eleanor walked down the aisle on Lady Beatrice's arm, having no father to give her away, she saw Alexander waiting at the altar. His eyes shone with emotion, and his smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. They spoke their vows in strong, clear voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the rector pronounced them husband and wife, and Alexander kissed her before the assembled congregation, Eleanor felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The wedding breakfast was held at Ashford Manor, with the ballroom decorated in flowers and ribbons. Guests danced and feasted, and even those who had initially disapproved seemed won over by the Duke's obvious joy and the new Duchess's grace and warmth. "You have done it," Lady Beatrice told Eleanor during a quiet moment. "You have brought happiness back to this family. I am proud of you, my dear daughter." Daughter. The word made Eleanor's eyes fill with tears. "Thank you, Your Grace, for everything. I would not be here without your support and faith in me." "Nonsense. You would have found a way. You are the most determined person I have ever met, excepting possibly myself." Lady Beatrice smiled. "Now go dance with your husband and stop being so serious. This is a celebration." Eleanor found Alexander surrounded by well-wishers, but when he saw her approach, he immediately excused himself and swept her onto the dance floor. They waltzed as they had at the ball months earlier, but now there were no barriers between them, no fear or uncertainty, only joy and love and the promise of a future built together. "Happy, Your Grace," Alexander murmured in her ear. Eleanor laughed at the title, still unused to being addressed as a duchess. Deliriously. "Though I still cannot quite believe this is real." "Believe it. You are mine, and I am yours, and nothing will ever separate us again." As evening fell and guests began to depart, Eleanor slipped away to the nursery to check on the children one last time before leaving for their honeymoon in Bath. She found them already in their nightclothes, being overseen by a nurse, but not yet asleep. "Mama!" Thomas called, testing out the new name with delight. "Hello, my darlings. I came to say good night." "You look like a princess," Amelia said, admiring Eleanor's gown. "The most beautiful duchess in all England." "That is very kind, but I am just me, and I am so grateful to be your mama now, officially and truly." She hugged them both tightly, these children who had stolen her heart from the very beginning. They would return from Bath in 2 weeks, and then their real life together would begin. But for now, she had 2 weeks alone with her husband to learn each other fully and to plan their future together. Alexander was waiting for her when she descended the stairs, changed now into travelling clothes. The carriage stood ready, and as they drove away from Ashford Manor toward their honeymoon, Eleanor looked back at the great house, lit up against the night sky. 6 months ago she had arrived as a governess, desperate for employment and expecting nothing but a position teaching children. Instead, she had found love, family, and a home. She had saved a duke's broken heart, but in the process he had healed hers as well. "What are you thinking?" Alexander asked, squeezing her hand. "That life is full of surprises. That happiness can be found in the most unexpected places. That I am the luckiest woman alive. I am the lucky one. You gave me back my life when I thought it was over. You gave me hope and joy, and a reason to wake each morning with gratitude instead of dread. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, content simply to be together. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. There would be challenges, certainly. Society would always have opinions, but they had each other, their children, and a love strong enough to weather any storm. And that, Eleanor thought as she rested her head on her husband's shoulder, was more than enough. It was everything. 2 years had passed since the spring wedding that had scandalized and charmed the county in equal measure. Ashford Manor had been transformed, not through extensive renovation, but through the intangible change that comes when a house becomes a true home. Laughter echoed through corridors that had once known only silence. Light flooded rooms that had been shrouded in mourning. Life had returned, abundant and joyful. Eleanor, now the Duchess of Ashford at 25, stood in the newly established schoolroom watching as Amelia, now 10, worked through a particularly challenging mathematics problem with fierce concentration. Thomas, at 8, was sprawled on the carpet nearby, reading aloud to his baby brother with dramatic flair. Yes, baby brother. Eleanor's hand drifted unconsciously to her still flat stomach, where another child grew. A secret she had not yet shared with anyone except Alexander. Their son, James, was 15 months old, a sturdy toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's grey eyes, and he was currently attempting to capture his eldest brother's attention by throwing blocks at the book. "James, darling, do not throw," Eleanor said gently, scooping up the child and settling him on her hip. "Let Thomas finish the story." "Mama, was it like this in the story?" Thomas asked, referring to his book of knights and castles. "Did they really have dragons?" "The book is fiction, darling. Dragons are imaginary, but castles and knights were very real." "Father says you are like a knight," Amelia interjected without looking up from her sums, "because you were brave enough to challenge him when everyone else was afraid." Eleanor smiled, her heart full. "Your father is very generous in his assessment. I was simply stubborn. Father also says that stubbornness and courage often look very similar." The Duke himself appeared in the doorway at that moment, as though summoned by the mention of his name. At 32, Alexander was more handsome than ever, the haunted look that had once shadowed his eyes, replaced by contentment and vitality. He had taken to his role as father and husband with the same intensity he brought to everything, and the results spoke for themselves in the happy, confident children who now filled his home. "Your sums are correct, Amelia," he said, having glanced over her shoulder at her work. "Well done. And Thomas, your reading has improved remarkably. Now who wants to ride out with me to inspect the new drainage system at the North Farm?" "I do," both older children chorused, abandoning their studies with the eagerness of youth. "Go dress for riding, then. We leave in 20 minutes. As the children thundered out of the schoolroom, Alexander crossed to Eleanor and kissed her soundly, much to young James's delight. "And how is my beautiful Duchess this morning?" "Your beautiful Duchess is contemplating how to tell you that the nursery will need to accommodate another resident in approximately 7 months. Alexander's eyes widened, then lit with joy. "Truly, Eleanor, that is wonderful news. Are you well? Should you be standing? Do you need to sit?" "I am perfectly well, and I will be standing, sitting, walking, and doing everything else I normally do for many months yet. But yes, truly, we are going to have another child." Alexander pulled her close, mindful of James between them, and buried his face in her hair. "You have given me so much. A family, a purpose, a reason to be grateful for every day. I do not know how I lived before you. You loved deeply and grieved deeply, because that is who you are. But we found each other, and that is what matters now." Life as the Duchess of Ashford had not been without challenges. In the first months of their marriage, Eleanor had made social missteps born of inexperience with aristocratic customs. She had once failed to correctly navigate the Byzantine rules of precedence at a dinner party, inadvertently offending a countess. She had struggled with a vast number of servants under her management, unused to commanding rather than serving. But with Lady Beatrice's patient guidance and Alexander's unwavering support, she had learned. More importantly, she had learned to trust her own judgment and to implement changes that reflected her values rather than simply maintaining tradition. She had established a school in the village for tenant children, ensuring they received education regardless of their family's circumstances. She had reorganized the household accounts, discovering inefficiencies that, once corrected, saved the estate considerable money. She had introduced new farming techniques that increased crop yields and improved tenant living conditions. Some of the old guard in county society still sniffed at the Duke's choice of bride, but most had been won over by Eleanor's genuine warmth, her obvious devotion to her family, and her practical contributions to the estate's prosperity. Those who remained critical found their opinions increasingly irrelevant as the Carmichael family's happiness and success became impossible to deny. Lady Charlotte Ashford had married a baronet the previous year, a match that was respectable but far beneath her ambitions. The baronet was wealthy but dull, and Charlotte, according to reports that filtered back through social channels, was profoundly unhappy in her marriage. She rarely appeared in society, having removed to her husband's estate in Yorkshire, where she reigned over a much smaller domain than she had once envisioned for herself. Eleanor felt only pity when she thought of Charlotte now. The woman had been so consumed by ambition and jealousy that she had destroyed her own chance at happiness. Eleanor hoped, charitably, that Charlotte might eventually find peace, but she no longer wasted energy worrying about it. The afternoon riding expedition was a success, with Amelia proving herself an increasingly skilled horsewoman and Thomas overcoming his initial nervousness to gallop alongside his father with growing confidence. Eleanor rode a gentle mare, with James secured in front of her in the saddle, both of them supervised anxiously by Alexander, who had become somewhat overprotective when it came to his family's safety. "You are hovering, darling," Eleanor told him with amusement as he rode alongside for the third time in as many minutes. "We are fine. James is secure, and I am not made of glass. I know, but I cannot help myself. You are precious to me, all of you." And that evening, after the children were settled in bed and James was sleeping peacefully in the nursery with his nurse nearby, Eleanor and Alexander sat together in the music room. It had become their habit to spend an hour here each evening, Alexander playing piano while Eleanor read or simply listened. Tonight, he played Chopin, the melancholic nocturnes that had been among Catherine's favorites. It no longer pained him to play these pieces. Instead, they had become a way of honoring her memory while acknowledging that life continued, beautiful and worth living. When the final notes faded, Eleanor spoke. "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me instead of someone who was born to this life?" Alexander turned on the piano bench to face her fully. "Not for a single moment, not even half a moment. Eleanor, you have made me happier than I ever imagined I could be. You brought life back to this house, to my children, to me. You are the best Duchess Ashford Manor has ever known, not because you were trained for it from birth, but precisely because you were not. You see what needs to be done with fresh eyes, and you have the courage to do it. But I make mistakes. I still do not always know which fork to use at formal dinners. And yet somehow the world continues to turn. My darling, you are intelligent, compassionate, and determined. Those qualities matter far more than knowing obscure rules about silverware. Anyone can be taught etiquette. Character is innate, and yours is exemplary." Eleanor crossed to him and settled onto the piano bench at his side. "I love you, Alexander. I loved you when I was afraid to admit it, and I love you now when I can say it freely. You have made me so happy. The happiness is entirely mutual. Now come, let us go to bed. Tomorrow we have the Thornburys coming for dinner, and you will need your rest." As they climbed the stairs to their chamber, passing portraits of Carmichael ancestors who gazed down with painted solemnity, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this place. She had come to Ashford Manor as a governess, hired to teach children and nothing more. Instead, she had found a family in desperate need of healing, and had somehow become the catalyst for that healing. The Duke, who had been drowning in grief, had learned to live again. The children who had been silent and withdrawn had blossomed into confident, happy youngsters. And Eleanor herself, who had expected nothing more than employment and security, had found a love that exceeded her wildest dreams. In their chamber, as Alexander helped her with the buttons of her gown and they prepared for bed with the comfortable intimacy of a married couple, Eleanor thought about the future. There would be more children to raise, an estate to manage, a society to navigate. There would be challenges and setbacks, joys and sorrows, the full tapestry of a life well lived. But they would face it together, the Duke and his governess-turned-duchess, united by a love that had overcome impossible odds. "What are you smiling about?" Alexander asked as they settled into bed, his arm drawing her close against his side. "I am thinking about how I came here to save your children and ended up saving myself. I thought my life was settled, that I would be a governess forever, supporting my family but never having one of my own. Instead, I found everything I did not know I was searching for. You saved all of us. Never doubt that. My children have a mother who adores them. I have a partner who challenges and supports me in equal measure. Even my mother has found new purpose in helping you navigate the complexities of aristocratic life. You are the center of this family, Eleanor, the heart that keeps us all beating in rhythm." Eleanor kissed him softly. "Then we have saved each other. That seems fair." Outside, rain began to fall gently on the estate, the same spring rain that had fallen the night Eleanor first arrived at Ashford Manor. But now, instead of seeming melancholy, the sound was peaceful, comforting, a lullaby for the household that slept secure in the knowledge that they were loved and valued. In the years that followed, the Carmichaels would face their share of trials. There would be illness and loss, financial challenges and social complications, but they would face it all as a family, united and strong. Amelia would grow into a remarkable young woman whose intellectual accomplishments would rival any man's, eventually marrying a brilliant young professor who valued her mind as much as her beauty. Thomas would become a respected diplomat, using the emotional intelligence gained from his difficult early years to navigate complex international negotiations. And the children Eleanor bore would grow up in a house filled with love and laughter, never knowing the suffocating grief that had once consumed their father. They would hear stories about their late grandmother Catherine, understanding that one could honor the past while embracing the present. Eleanor would become known throughout the county not as the governess who married above her station, but as the duchess who transformed her estate, improved her tenants' lives, and raised a generation of Carmichaels who were as remarkable for their compassion as for their privilege. But all that lay in the future. Tonight, in the quiet darkness of their chamber, Alexander and Eleanor simply held each other, grateful for the improbable love that had saved them both. The governess had been hired for the children, that much was true. But in the end, she had saved something far more precious, a duke's broken heart, and in doing so, had healed her own. And they all lived, not in a fairy tale where nothing ever went wrong, but in the real world where love and determination could overcome even the greatest obstacles. They lived with purpose, with joy, with the knowledge that they had chosen each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ruins of grief. They lived well, and they lived happily, and that was the greatest triumph of all. If you have been listening to this story, do not forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you are listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled.